I'm Britton Clannett and welcome to China Insight, where we look closely at the latest issues affecting this rapidly changing country. Piano lessons appear to be the extracurricular activity of choice for Chinese parents who want their kids to acquire a skill which displays a sense of class and discipline. Officials are also recognizing the benefits of China's interest in classical music by injecting investment into building concert halls and establishing orchestras. And with a huge pool of talent to pick from, it's likely that China's musical prowess will continue to hit the high notes. With me today to discuss classical music in China is Zhang Kemin, a musical theatre director, songwriter and founder of Bukaopu Concert Salon. Welcome to the show.
It's great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Could you start by telling us a little bit about your experience with classical music in China?
Fortunately, I was born into a family that everybody else in the family was a musician. My grandfather was a conductor, my grandmother was a violinist, my mother played the harp, my father played the French horn, so I grew up listening to quite a lot of music growing up. Especially when they're preparing for the concerts, or even just in general as enjoyment. So
in China or abroad?
In China. I was born in Beijing, and it was in part of this called Hepingli. It is a compound for the National Symphony. It used to be called the Central Society of Symphony Society or something, 中央乐团. Now it's called the National Symphony Orchestra, China National Orchestra. And
so you didn't really have a choice? Classical
didn't
music
know.
was kind of inborn to you.
I didn't even know that life could exist differently. I thought that's just what happens. Everybody wake up, listen to some music, play some piano, eat your breakfast. That's normal.
So did you have kind of stereotypical parents that said, you had to learn piano, you had to practice so many hours a day?
Not really, to be honest. I had parents that encouraged me to learn the piano, especially since I was born. I didn't have a choice. I didn't know that not playing the piano was an option. I just assumed everybody ate food and played piano and slept, and that was what you do. Until maybe later, I was like 6 or 7, I went to school and realized there are other kids who could go out and play during the time that I had to practice. And I asked my mom, why do I have to do this? And they get to play. And my mom said, you'll understand when you're older. And I look forward to being older.
Well, I'm sure you can relate to the contestants in our report. China Insight followed a piano competition. Let's take a look.
We've come to CCTV's triennial Young Pianist contest. It brings together the very best talent in the country. The contestants have been practicing day and night to perfect their pieces. Almost all say they'd like to be professional pianists.
How old were you when you first started playing the piano?
I think 5 years old, about 5 years old.
They're here for one thing.
争取拿第1名吧。第1名，想拿第1名是肯定的。是的。
10-year-old Wang Chunyi is considered one of the favourites in the competition. Every day over breakfast, Wang enjoys listening to her idols. Then she gets right to the piano.
3岁半的时候，他拿钢琴当玩具，就幼儿园学的儿歌，他在钢琴上都可以弹出来。后来到5岁的时候，他参加一个小比赛，北京市希望杯，得了第1名。从此以后，他对自己就有了，一个是有了自信心，有了这个荣誉感，所以他对这个钢琴就更加喜欢。
It's now around 7:30 in the morning. For Wang Chunyi, this is the start of her daily 5 hours of practice. And it's this dedication which has helped her pick up a host of national and international prizes in the last year. 13-year-old Mark Zeng has travelled from Fujian in southern China to take part in this competition. He's rented out a rehearsal room for some last-minute practice.
6 years ago, I started playing piano 3 hours a day. If it's summer vacation, 5 hours a day. It's a lot. Playing those Beethoven's, Mozart, Liszt, those things, I think beautiful.
Both Mark's parents are music teachers, so he encountered classical music at a tender age.
我们给学生上课的时候呢，比如说他听久了一首曲子呢，学生有弹错的时候，他那个时候才10几个，也很小，他自己会跑过来说：“哎，姐姐弹错了。”那我们就感觉说他应该在这方面蛮有天赋的，所以就比较早让他接触钢琴。
Back at CCTV, the contestants are preparing for their big moment.
你自己有这个感觉，我相信你就能弹好。
Chun-Yi tells us her biggest rival is Sha Duoduo.
那叫夏多多，他弹得非常好。他是按这个顺序写，不管很高卡。
让我最骄傲的时刻，就我女儿上台领奖的时刻。我女儿每次上台领奖，我可能是那个眼眶都是湿润的。学琴的孩子们太苦了。他还要学习，还要练琴，然后呢，我女儿比较要强，她还得这么小的孩子，她还得顶着那个上台比赛的那个竞争的那种心态，啊，我觉得每一次对她这个锻炼都是个成长，每一次她上台得的这个荣誉呢，对我也是一个那个鼓励。
谢谢王春艺的演奏。那么首先有请3位老师给王春艺的演奏打出一个分数。
对，我们觉得我们只能为你鼓掌，只剩下为你鼓掌了，真的好棒。
我们觉得你以后就是钢琴家。
对，你现在已经可以是钢琴家了。
Yuan Jie has returned to China to serve as a judge in the competition. After 10 years at the prestigious Juilliard School in New York, he's now a concert pianist. But many years ago, he too was a kid, striving to be the best.
My competition history starts from age of 7 until last year. No, actually this year in May. So it was 25 years of competing. In the Eastern education, success is the ultimate goal. Everything you do has to have a result. You cannot waste your time on painting or climbing or any other interest you want besides piano. To become even a good piano student, you have to sacrifice a lot of things in China. Friends.
For Chun-Yi, it's the same. But she feels it's worth it.
他们觉得学专业每天练习太枯燥了，一做就是要做6、7个小时，他们觉得很没意思。就是小的时候不能像他们那样玩，但是呢，长大了就可以比他们好很多。
Nestled in the heart of Beijing lies China's Central Conservatory of Music. It's one of the country's most prestigious music schools. I'm meeting the Vice Dean, Professor Zhou Haihong. He's a trained pianist, and he's also considered the father of music psychology in China.
我们国家目前学琴呢有一个问题，我把它称之为过于专业化的问题。就是本来业余学琴应该是以提升孩子的审美素质为核心，应该让孩子在通过学琴热爱音乐，通过音乐热爱艺术。本来审美教育应该在童年大家加强，知识教育呢放在以后。结果呢，我们发现现在好多教育变成了知识学习在童年，小孩那么小的时候学大量的知识，结果呢上大学以后再重新补艺术课，程序就反了。希望能够走出过于专业化的误区， 防止孩子学了一门技术恨了一门艺术这样一种现象。
But Professor Zhou has been working on a solution.
做的一个童话故事，因为要给孩子讲音乐，一定要用孩子的方式，叫唤醒春天 ，Wake up the spring。是这个，然后你翻过来以后。
这一年的冬天啊，好长好长，不知为什么。
I've just got this fantastic book that Professor Zhou has recently finished writing, and he spent 5 years on. And it's absolutely beautiful, as you can see. Here is a really good way of showing society and the world that classical music doesn't have to be boring, traditional, all those notes on the black and white page. In fact, it's very simple and can be fun.
The professor also promotes the understanding of music amongst the general public.
他言说语言无法言说之物，他从心灵说向心灵的语言。
Zhou hopes that encouraging an appreciation of beauty will help improve people's moral character. His dream is for one day all Chinese children to learn an instrument and stick with it from at least primary to middle school.
通过音乐热爱艺术，通过艺术热爱生活，在生活当中体验幸福。我们的教育应该以快乐为核心，以审美为导向，展开我们的学习教育。
It's the last day of the competition. Wang Chunyi has reached the final 3.
我要宣布的是2014 CCTV 钢琴小提琴大赛钢琴业余一组决赛的最后结果。获得铜奖的是王春义，获得银奖的小朋友是朱子赫，获得金奖的是夏多多。让我们掌声恭喜3位小朋友。
像这次那个 CCTV 大赛，他是想拿第1名。可是他拿了第3名，当时你采访的时候，你看他还是忍着。出来以后，他哥哥给他打电话说：“你很棒，你在我心目里你已经第1了。”他就已经说不出话来，一句话说不了，就是哭。那天晚上回来以后，就几乎是不太睡觉。我觉着哈，那个有的家长说路子窄哈，就是我觉着。一个人不管做哪一行，你要想做得好一些，要想做的那个不说出类拔萃吧，就是优秀一些，他都要付出努力的，不管是哪一行。所以说钢琴也一样。
Whatever paths China's young musicians choose, the country is making its presence felt in the world of classical music. For the first time ever, China's Philharmonic Orchestra performed at the prestigious Proms at London's Royal Albert Hall in June. And the NCPA's own orchestra has been on its biggest ever US tour. Yuanjie's own school, Juilliard, is looking into the idea of its first ever non-US campus in Tianjin near Beijing. Wang Chunyi has now started at the primary school affiliated to the Central Conservatory.
好几百万的、好几千万的人，也就出来也就不超过10个。这个很难，我不一定说就一定能达到，但是我要去努力。
As for Mark, he has other plans.
I want to be a CEO like Steve Jobs.
So was that like your experience? Can you relate to that?
To be a CEO like Steve Jobs?
Well,
no.
Not the last comment, but the experience of being in a competition.
Yes, except I didn't really enter into competitions with such desire to win. I enjoyed playing. I enjoyed meeting other kids who played music. And for me, it's like a party. I get to hang out with other piano kids, and you can
So
make some
even
friends.
at that age, you could recognize the benefit of the journey and the experience, not just the end goal?
Because maybe at that age, I kind of knew that going for first place every time, it's just going to stress me out. If I didn't give myself that much
That's
stress...
quite a mature outlook for a child.
Well, I think the first time I got a first place, I'm like, all right, next time I'm going to go for it. The next time I got a second. And it wasn't that bad. I was like, well, second place is still okay. I still had a good time, And eventually I realized it's more about really beating yourself. You enter these competitions so that you have a drive, you have a motivation to work on a piece or a series of pieces. And you have to play it better than the last time you entered. It's more about beating yourself.
Wang Chunyi, her mum didn't put that much pressure on her. But she put a lot of pressure on herself. Where do you think that pressure came from?
I think it's still from the parents. It might not seem like her mother's giving her much pressure on this film.
But she's sacrificing a lot for her. Is that what you mean?
Just in the way that she speaks about it, that she says to be a piano student in China, you have to work very hard and it's a lot of sacrifice. That mentality already tells us that she has a mentality to sacrifice and it's hard. But it's not hard. If you love what you do, you're just there.
Is that what you were like? It was really just the passion?
Yeah, sometimes when I get into it, I really didn't, I'd rather skip dinner. Like, I don't want to stop right now. This is a good,
But you could almost see that with Wang Chunyi and Mak Sang. They really, they did, the passion was there.
Yes, definitely.
But the pressure was obviously there too. You could see how upset she was when she'd lost.
Yes, unfortunately. I wish she could just keep the passion part of it. And let go of all because everything else is meaningless. Prizes, winning first place, they're all meaningless. What's important is what music does to you, how it benefits your soul. How by practicing every day, you're going into this almost meditative state of spirituality. Like it's very pure. Like the music doesn't lie. What you feel from playing is the truth.
Why the piano? Why is there such a big interest in kids learning the piano?
Personally, I think piano is the coolest instrument because it can be a solo instrument, it can be accompaniment. You can play chords, you can sing, you can accompany yourself, you can also be a soloist just to play the piano. And it also gives you a very overall understanding, a very good understanding of harmony. If you want to go into composing, piano is more important. If you play violin, you're playing one line, you're playing one voice. Some pieces will have double stops, but still it's mostly one voice. But the piano, since the beginning, you have Bach who wrote all these, 3-part, 4-part, 5-part inventions. You have to, figure out 5 voices with your 10 fingers, and each one have to have its own melodic line and carry through. It's, it's
I can feel your passion.
Oh,
it is quite addictive, isn't it?
Oh, it's amazing. It's almost like solving math equations. Getting to a Bach fugue, for example, and you're just sitting there, and it's so complicated. Somehow this guy have mapped out every note perfectly so that it all sounds good, no matter how. It's amazing.
You learned piano in China and abroad, is that right?
Yes.
How were they different?
To be honest, I think when I was in China, I was much more diligent. I practiced more. There was less distractions.
Were your teachers stricter?
Yes. Well, I don't know. Maybe they are. Maybe by there were strict teachers on both ends. But I think in Canada, the environment, the teachers are used to kids who don't practice every day, or there's a lot more students who just do it as a hobby. But in China, every student is there to, achieve some great goal of becoming a star, or at least they have that dream. So the pressure is a lot higher in China.
I want to ask you about this boom of classical music in China. When did it start, in your eyes?
Personally, I think the boom of Western classical music started in 1987. to the date because I remember my grandpa conducted a concert at the Shouti, the capital stadium. At the time, it was 800 people in this orchestra. It's probably the biggest orchestra ever assembled, and it consists of all the professional orchestras in Beijing, the film orchestra, the Beijing Symphony, the National Orchestra, you name it, the ballet, the opera, even the kids who were still students at the conservatory, everybody who learned or musicians professionally were a part of this orchestra, and they played the 1812 Overture by Tchaikovsky, and it was a huge, grand thing. The concert was called the Spring of the Symphony, and it sort of marked the legitimate beginning of us in this country celebrating Western classical music in this way, because only 10 years ago, in '77, I think during that time, it wasn't even allowed to play Beethoven. For about 10 years. And of course, we've come a long way since then. And Isaac Stern brought his crew over to China and made the documentary From Mao to Mozart, which kind of also opened China's classical music scene to the world for the first time. And then we realized we have all these great kids with these players in the conservatories in Beijing and Shanghai, and they all had great skill, and they were just waiting for the opportunity to share their art with the world.
And of course, then since then, there's been huge investment into music halls and building up these orchestras. Is this the boom of Western classical music in China, do you think?
I think this is part of the beginning of it. We will still see much more to come.
Yeah, it almost seems like more young Chinese kids are interested in Western Chinese music than Western children.
It's the same case with Kung Fu. There's more Americans taking Kung Fu classes than Chinese kids.
Right.
It's always cooler to learn the thing.
It almost doesn't matter the origins of these things sometimes when,
I think
if it came from the West, then...
It's cooler to learn something from the West, I think. For China, everybody's learning...
And cooler for
Yeah, cooler for Americans or the Westerners to learn something Chinese, like karate or kung fu or
Is it intrigue, or is there something about Chinese culture that you think has a sort of a natural taking towards classical music, Western classical music?
Western classical music happens to be, I think, it's like a technology. A friend of mine used to make this allegory that. Imagine the orchestra being a hardware, like a computer, and the software being the sheet music that the composer would write. So the composer takes the software, gives it to the orchestra, and whatever orchestra at whatever city in the world would be able to replicate the sounds that were imagined by the composer. And that's the technology of the symphony.
Right.
Now, it follows the Western tradition because in the West, they developed the French horn, they developed the string instruments. We're using this format. It's like, maybe in America, they developed DOS. And so we're still using Windows now. But the software could be Chinese. We could put in Chinese music. We could have a Chinese composer or write a guzheng concerto with the symphony and still be Western, but it would be Chinese.
Okay. All right. Well, after the break, I'm going to ask you about Peking opera, which I know you're a fan about. Yes. So stay with us, please. Welcome back to China Insight. I've been discussing Western classical music in China with my guest, Zhang Kemin. Well, Peking opera is a type of classical music popular during the Qing dynasty, and we took to the streets of Beijing to gauge whether Peking opera is losing its appeal with youngsters today. Let's take a look.
不太看，但是也算有兴趣。怎么说呢？就是电影里出现的时候会觉得特别美。
我平时有时候看看，不多，反正一般现在年轻人比较潮流的就是把这个现在的歌改成京剧唱，不是？霍尊就是一个代表。
I think it's really interesting, but it's a bit long, and the music for Western ears is
bit strange.
如果那个让我花钱的话，我可能不会去看。
Peking opera. When you talk to a Chinese person, I think they say, "Oh, why do you want to do that? It's very boring." But I believe there's kind of a beauty in it. I know it comes from Anhui Province.
我觉得应该在这方面引导一下吧，是不是？有人像唱歌似的，大家都能够，大多数的普及一下。
Some mixed reactions there. What do you think?
Well, I think this is quite normal because I think many people don't really have an opportunity to seriously get into one.
Right. It seemed like a lot of them hadn't really had the opportunity to kind of see it.
Yeah, and it's not fair to judge an art form by seeing only partially, a bit of it. It's like, do you like the Mona Lisa? Oh, I saw part of the frame. It's kind of, whatever. Like you really have to be there and absorb into the painting to appreciate the painting. Similarly, the Peking opera, you should go and sit through a show
before you decide.
Yeah, because we always see snippets. We always see excerpts on TV of Peking opera, and they don't really do it justice. And usually it's misrepresented. It's on a different stage. Maybe they're not in makeup. Maybe they're not really putting on the whole show. But it's not really fair.
But how do you get people to appreciate it? How do you get people to see it?
Well, my recommendation is your first Peking opera show should be kung fu related. There's the scholarly one, there's the warrior shows. The scholar shows is all the singing and it's very poetic and boring. If you're not into it, but in the beginning, if you don't know anything about it, watch a warrior show. Watch one of those, things about loyalty and righteousness and justice. And it's they have very common sort of hero themes, about the underdog, coming up to the top, and sort of historical stories, probably taken from chapters of The Water Margin or the Three Kingdoms or The Monkey King, all those great stories. And if you know the story, if you read the chapter and you go watch the show, it wouldn't be boring because you know what's going to come up. You are expecting it and anticipating the plot. But at the same time, the artistry of the performers, their enunciation of the language, the poetic, the written words, the poetry of the written words, the prose, the rhythm. I wouldn't say so much about the music because the music is quite limited to the music of the time. Now, there has been attempts to use the symphony orchestra to accompany Peking opera. And that was during, the Cultural Revolution. They made a lot of interesting artistic attempts. I think a recent movie of 智取威虎山 was a remake of one of the sort of Peking opera musical theater shows. I think that's actually one of the most original musicals from China, like from that time. And they were all Peking opera style shows. And they were mostly, talking about the war and heroism in that.
Thank you very much for coming on the show, Zhang Kemin.
The pleasure's mine.
If you have any comments or questions, email us at chinainsight@cctv.com, or you can find us on Facebook, Weibo, or WeChat. And we'll see you next time for more stories and discussion on China out of China. Goodbye.